The hospital corridor echoed with the frantic squeal of wheels as a gurney was rushed through its double doors. Nurses shouted, their voices laced with panic. "Clear the way. Emergency incoming." Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on the pale face of the woman lying unconscious, her head lolled to the side, and beneath her cheek a grotesque swelling pulse like it had a heartbeat of its own. "Doctor, her vitals are crashing. BP falling, pulse irregular," cried a nurse, staring at the monitor. The room erupted in chaos. Metal trays clattered. Gloves snapped. A defibrillator was dragged across the floor. "Scalpel. Now!" the surgeon barked, sweat dripping down his brow. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the fear gnawing at him. The lump on her face stretched unnaturally, as though something inside was pressing against her skin, desperate to break free. One young intern, trembling at the sight, whispered, That doesn't look like a normal tumor." "Focus," the doctor snapped. "We're losing her." Her body convulsed, a chilling rattle escaping her throat. "Charge to 200, clear." Her body jerked violently as the defibrillator pads discharged, the smell of burnt skin lingering in the air. The monitor screamed with a flatline tone. "No pulse. She's slipping away," shouted another nurse, tears welling in her eyes. The surgeon's hands hovered above the swelling, scalpel ready. For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. Everyone in the room leaned in, terrified yet unable to look away. He pressed the blade to her skin. One slice, and what spilled out silenced the entire room. A nurse dropped her tray. Someone gasped. The surgeon froze, disbelief etched across his face, because what poured out was not blood. It was something far more disturbing, something that made even seasoned doctors recoil in horror. Please subscribe. Just one click from you gives me endless motivation to keep creating. And what they found inside left everyone frozen in fear. The silence in the operating room was deafening. Only the beeping of the machines and the shallow gasp of the nurses filled the air. The surgeon's hand trembled slightly as he peered into the gaping incision. His eyes narrowed, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This isn't normal," he muttered under his breath. The swelling that everyone assumed to be a tumor had split open like a grotesque pod. Inside, the tissue writhed. It wasn't solid. It wasn't liquid. It was something in between, thick, slimy, and pulsing as though it had a life of its own. A young nurse took a step back, her hand covering her mouth. "Oh my God, would I ask that?" The surgeon leaned closer, his gloved fingers hovering inches away. The mask quivered, almost as if it sensed him. "Retractor," he demanded, his voice sharper now. Two assistants moved quickly, sliding metal tools into the wound and pulling it open wider. The operating lights gleamed against the wet, glistening surface inside. The smell hit them next, rancid, sour, metallic. It was the kind of stench that clung to your nostrils and wouldn't let go. "Careful, doctor," one nurse warned, her voice cracking. But the surgeon had already begun probing deeper. His scalpel slid into the mass. A sudden gush of fluid spilled out, splattering across his gloves. A scream echoed through the room. One of the interns staggered back, bumping into the tray of instruments. The clatter of metal against tile rang out like thunder. The surgeon didn't flinch. He had seen cancers, abscesses, cysts, but this was different. This thing seemed alive. "Doctor, it's moving," whispered the anesthesiologist, her eyes wide with horror. The surgeon paused, staring into the writhing mess beneath the woman's skin. His chest rose and fell heavily. "This isn't a tumor," he whispered. Everyone froze. A cold shiver ran down their spines. Because if it wasn't a tumor, then what in God's name had been growing inside her face? The monitors screamed again. The jagged green line on the heart monitor stuttered, then flatlined into a single piercing tone. "Cardiac arrest." "We're losing her," the nurse shouted, panic surging through her voice. The surgeon's head snapped up. "Start compressions, now." Gloved hands pressed into the woman's chest. Each pump rattled her fragile frame, her face wound still grotesquely open. The strange mass inside twitched with every compression, as though mocking their desperate attempt to keep her alive. "Adrenaline 1 milligram. Stat, barked the anesthesiologist. A syringe pierced her vein. The plunger went down. The team waited, praying for response. Nothing. The flatline tone cut through the air like a death sentence. Charged at 200 clear, her body jolted off the table. For one fleeting second, the monitor flickered. A heartbeat, then it vanished again. "She's not coming back," a young intern cried, tears pooling in her eyes. "Again!" the surgeon roared, sweat dripping down his temples. Charged at 300 clear. Her body arched violently, the force rattling the metal table. The surgical lamps above trembled with the vibration. The monitor beeped. Once, twice, then silence again. "Doctor, her oxygen's dropping, 60%, 55. Another nurse gripped the surgeon's sleeve, her knuckles white. "We can't save her, doctor. Whatever that thing is, it's killing her." The surgeon ripped his arm free, his eyes blazing. "Not on my table. Not today." He plunged his hands back into the wound, forcing himself deeper into the swelling. The mass squirmed beneath his touch, a sickening ripple moving across the woman's cheek. For a heartbeat, everyone in the room froze. Was it possible? Could the growth itself be fighting them? The surgeon's voice dropped, barely a whisper. "It's alive." Before anyone could respond, the monitors shrieked again. Her blood pressure plummeted. Oxygen flatlined. The entire room seemed to collapse into chaos, shouting, alarms, frantic hands flying across her body. And for a horrifying moment, the team realized they were not only fighting to save her life, they were fighting something inside her, something that wasn't ready to let go. Just as the chaos inside the operating room reached its breaking point, the screen fades to black. The sound of hospital alarms fades away, replaced by the gentle laughter of children. We are suddenly inside a small, sunlit kitchen. A woman, her face still beautiful despite the faint shadows swelling along her cheek, stirs a pot on the stove. Steam rises, filling the room with the smell of spices. "Mom, you promised you'd come to my recital." A little girl shouts, running in, holding a crumpled flyer in her hand. The woman smiles warmly, ruffling her daughter's hair. "And I will, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Her husband leans against the doorway, exhaustion etched across his face. He watches her closely, his eyes drifting to that faint bump on her cheek. "You should see a doctor about that," he says softly. "It's getting bigger." She brushes it off with a wave of her hand. "It's just a little swelling. Probably nothing." But late at night, when everyone was asleep, she would stand in front of the mirror. The bump glared back at her, growing a little more each day. She would touch it, feel the strange pressure beneath, and a flicker of fear would pass across her eyes. Still, she never said a word. She was a mother, a wife, the caretaker of her home. And in her heart, she couldn't allow herself to be the sick one, not when everyone else depended on her. Her husband tried again. "Please, just one checkup. For me, for the kids." She smiled, hiding her fear behind gentle eyes. After the recital, after the chores, after everything else. But after never came. Because while she cooked, cleaned, and smiled through her pain, the lump inside her face was quietly transforming into something far more sinister. And now, on the cold steel table of the operating room, that choice, to ignore or to postpone, was threatening to steal her away forever. Her daughter's laughter echoes faintly, almost like a memory slipping away. Would she live to hear it again? The flashback lingers in the soft glow of memory. Her smile, her laughter, her gentle way of hiding pain. But behind those smiles was a truth no one saw. The swelling on her cheek had started as something tiny, barely noticeable. A small bump, like a pimple under the skin. She had even joked about it once while brushing her hair. "Guess I'm getting old," she had laughed. Wrinkles, bumps, and all. But deep down, she knew it wasn't normal. Each morning, when she washed her face, she could feel it. Harder, denser, pressing deeper into her flesh. At first, she told herself it was stress. Then maybe an infected tooth. Then maybe just nothing. But nothing doesn't grow. Within months, the bump had swelled into something impossible to ignore. Makeup no longer hid it. People at the market began to glance twice. Friends tilted their heads when they spoke to her, pretending not to notice. Her husband begged again. "Please, go to the doctor. Please." But she shook her head. "We can't afford it. The children's school fees, the rent, we need every rupee. I can handle this." And so she bore the weight of it alone. She cooked, cleaned, kissed her children good night, all while a silent monster grew beneath her skin. At night, when everyone slept, she would press her cheek against her pillow, tears soaking into the fabric as the pain throbbed. But still she stayed quiet, because in her heart, she believed this was her burden to carry. Weeks turned into months. The swelling warped her once delicate features. Her smile, once radiant, now looked strained, twisted. The neighbors began to whisper. Her children started asking questions she couldn't answer. And yet she refused. Refused to acknowledge what her body was screaming. Refused to face the truth that something unnatural was living inside her. And now, as doctors fought desperately to keep her alive, that truth was finally clawing its way out into the open. The question was, what exactly had she been hiding all this time? The operating room hung in a suffocating silence. Every eye was fixed on the surgeon's trembling hands as he peeled back another layer of swollen tissue. The lights gleamed off his scalpel, the air thick with a rancid smell spilling from a wound. A nurse gagged, covering her mouth. "Doctor, it's still moving." The surgeon swallowed hard. He leaned closer, his gloved fingers sliding deeper into the grotesque cavity in her cheek. What he touched didn't feel like a tumor. It was soft, then suddenly hard. It squirmed under his fingertips. He froze. Then, with one decisive tug, he pulled. The entire room recoiled. Something long and slick slid out of her face, pale, coiled, and writhing like it was alive. It slapped against the tray with a wet thud. For a moment, everyone thought it was a nightmare. It wasn't. "Oh my God, are those worms?" gasped an intern, stumbling back in horror. It wasn't just one. As the surgeon widened the opening, more began to emerge. Thin, pale parasites wriggled from the wound, their bodies squirming in the sterile light. They poured out in clusters, slithering like snakes escaping a cage. A nurse screamed. Another dropped her instrument and staggered toward the door, her face white as chalk. The anesthesiologist whispered in disbelief, How could she have survived with that inside her?" The surgeon's hands shook as he tried to collect the writhing mass, pulling them free one by one. Each parasite seemed endless, sliding out like coils of rope from a bottomless pit. The woman's body convulsed violently, monitors shrieking again. For a horrifying second, it looked as though the parasites were feeding off her, draining her life even as they were removed. "Keep her stable," the surgeon barked, panic sharpening his tone. "Suction now." But the more they pulled, the more they found. Not blood, not pus, worms. A grotesque colony that had taken root inside her face, spreading, multiplying, feeding. Even the surgeon, battle-hardened, unshaken by decades of horrors, stared in disbelief. His voice broke as he whispered the words no one in the room would ever forget. This is not a tumor. She's been living with a nest inside her. The room spun with nausea, terror, disbelief, and the question everyone was too afraid to ask hung in the sterile air. How long had they been inside her? The surgeon's words echoed through the sterile operating room like a death sentence. A nest inside her. But how could this have happened? How could a woman, so ordinary, so loving, so devoted to her family, harbor something so unthinkable beneath her skin? The screen fades to darkness. And then a flashback. She sits on a worn wooden stool outside her home, washing vegetables in a plastic basin. A faint breeze stirs the dust, carrying the smell of damp earth. Her children chase each other nearby, laughter ringing through the evening air. But as she leans forward, she scratches her cheek absent-mindedly. The bump is still small then, barely noticeable. A mosquito bite, she thinks, or maybe a small infection. Weeks later, she tends to her garden. A cut from a thorn leaves a raw scratch across the same side of her face. She wipes it with her apron and moves on, ignoring the sting. Life doesn't stop for pain, pain had a way of settling in. In the quiet of the night, when her husband snored softly beside her, she could feel it, a crawling sensation deep beneath her skin. At first, she thought it was her imagination, stress, fatigue, maybe a toothache spreading. But then came the dreams. Vivid, terrifying dreams of insects crawling across her face, burrowing deeper, nesting where no one could see. She would wake with a start, drenched in sweat, pressing her palm against her swollen cheek. Still, she said nothing, until one night, unable to bear the throbbing, she pressed a warm cloth against her face and swore she felt movement beneath her skin. She gasped, dropping the cloth, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes widened. For a split second, just a split second, she thought she saw the lump twitch. But morning came, and with it denial. She smiled at her children, packed their lunches, sent them to school. She never spoke of it again. And that silence, that refusal, gave them time. Time for the parasites to grow. Time for them to multiply. Time for them to turn her face into their nest. By the time she finally collapsed, by the time her family rushed her to the hospital, it was too late. The colony inside her was thriving, spreading, feeding. And now, in the cold brightness of the operating room, that dark truth was finally laid bare for all to see. The news broke before the surgery was even over. A trembling nurse, unable to contain the horror of what she had just witnessed, whispered it to a colleague in the hallway. Within hours, the whispers had grown into wildfire. By dawn, the hospital was surrounded. Reporters pressed against the glass doors, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Is it true a woman was found with parasites inside her face? Doctor, was this a case of medical negligence? Is the hospital hiding something? The hospital director stood stiffly at the podium, sweat glistening under a barrage of camera lights. We are doing everything possible to stabilize the patient. We will release an official statement when we know more. But the crowd wasn't satisfied. The story had already gone viral online. Headlines screamed, "Woman's tumor bursts into horror at City Hospital. Doctor stunned by living creatures inside patient's face. Medical mystery or criminal neglect?" Social media exploded. Some blamed the hospital, claiming they ignored her earlier visits. Others pointed fingers at her family for not forcing her into treatment sooner. In a darker corner of the internet spun conspiracies, whispers of biological experiments, parasites engineered in secret labs, cover-ups. Her husband sat slumped in a hospital chair, his face hollow with guilt. Reporters shoved cameras in his direction. Why didn't you bring her in sooner? Did you ignore her condition? He buried his face in his hands, whispering only, she didn't want to worry anyone. She didn't want the children to know. The police soon arrived, demanding reports, medical histories, every scrap of evidence. Was this simple neglect or something more sinister? Inside the hospital, tension crackled like lightning. Nurses whispered about quitting. Patients demanded to be discharged, terrified they might be infected too. The surgeon, weary and shaken, faced a storm of accusations. "You cut her open without authorization," a board member barked. "Do you understand the liability this hospital faces?" He slammed his fist on the table. Liability? That woman had a nest of living parasites inside her face. We weren't fighting a lawsuit. We were fighting death itself. But outside those sterile walls, the world was less forgiving. The woman's story had escaped the operating room. It was no longer just a medical emergency. It had become a scandal, a headline, a battle between truth, blame, and fear. And as the cameras kept flashing, no one could say how much longer she would even survive. The monitors had been screaming for nearly an hour. Each spike of sound felt like a countdown to the inevitable. Her body lay limp on the table, drained, hollowed out by what had been inside her. The surgeons were exhausted, gloves soaked in sweat, masks fogged from heavy breaths. A pile of writhing, pale worms lay collected in metal trays beside them, an obscene reminder of what they had pulled from her face. One nurse wiped her brow, whispering, "She's not going to make it." The surgeon's eyes narrowed. "Not yet. Not while she still has a chance." He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Faint, almost nothing. But there it was, a thread of life. Again, he ordered. CPR. Push harder. The team worked like a machine, compressions pounding her chest, oxygen pumping to the mask, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Minutes blurred into eternity. Then beep. The faintest flicker lit up the heart monitor. A whisper of rhythm. Wait, wait! She's coming back, cried the anesthesiologist. Another beep. Then another. The flat line stretched into tiny hills, small but steady. She's stabilizing. The room erupted in disbelief. Nurses who had been moments from giving up now clung to hope with trembling hands. Tears welled in their eyes as her chest began to rise on its own. Blood pressure climbing. 60, 70, heart rate at 55 and holding. The surgeon finally stepped back, chest heaving. His hands trembled as he pulled off his gloves. She shouldn't have survived this, he muttered, almost to himself. But she did. Her husband burst into the room moments later, security unable to hold him back. He froze when he saw her, pale, scarred, but breathing, alive. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched her hand, whispering, "You came back to us, you came back." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady, miraculous rhythm of the heart monitor, a rhythm everyone in that room knew. They would never forget. Against all odds, she had survived. The chaos faded. The alarms were silenced. She lay in her hospital bed, frail but alive. Her face was bandaged, the swelling gone, though the scars remained. But behind those scars, her eyes opened, weary, yet filled with something unshakable. Her children rushed in first, their small arms wrapping tightly around her. Tears streamed down their cheeks as they cried, "Mommy, Mommy, you're okay." Her husband followed, kneeling at her bedside, his hand trembling as he stroked her hair. For days, he had lived with the fear that she wouldn't return to them. Now, with her hand in his, he whispered through tears, "We almost lost you, but you fought your way back." Doctors stood nearby, still shaken by what they had seen. Even seasoned surgeons confessed they had never witnessed something so bizarre, so horrifying, and yet so miraculous. The story spread far and wide. For weeks, people spoke of the woman who had lived with a parasite colony inside her face, who had been moments from death, but refused to let go. She became a symbol of survival, of stubborn strength against impossible odds. But to her, the lesson was far more personal. Through cracked lips, her voice soft but steady, she said to the cameras gathered around her bed, "Don't ignore the pain. Don't hide it for the sake of others. I thought I was protecting my family, but I almost left them without a mother, without a wife. Please, if something feels wrong, seek help. Don't wait until it's too late." Her words rippled through every listener's heart, because her suffering had not just been a tragedy. It had become a warning. And as her family held her close, one truth lingered in the air like a promise. Life is fragile, health is precious, and silence can be deadly. Her scars would tell the story forever. A story not of horror alone, but of survival, love, and the strength of a woman who refused to let death win.